Agustin, we are live. And Agustin, present to everyone. Okay, your screen.
Hello, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
So, hi everyone, and welcome to the wonderful world of Layoutit. I have a few slides to show an overview of CSS Grid, which is the specification that Layoutit uses. So first, we're going to be doing a little overview of the principal concepts. So what is it? It's a new kind of display property for elements in CSS. As we have floats, flexbox, inline and inline block, we also have grid now. And the main difference with all the other kinds of layout is that you can build two-dimensional layouts and position them using grid lines and grid names. So that is the big picture. Then we have these concepts. To set up the grid, you need to do it on the parent, on the grid container. And you have to define the rows and the columns. For that, we have grid template rows and grid template columns. You can see here a little example. We have one FR, one FR, one FR, one FR. And then once we define this, we can use the lines that we create to position the elements that are inside the grid container. So the child of the grid container is content, and we can position it using grid area, referencing the lines that would be like, it starts on 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3. So that's the basic idea.
Could you press the hide there?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Never happens, no worries.
You can talk, Iago. You can't talk. This is my talk. Then we have the gaps and sizing units. This is one of the new features of the specification. We have the FR that we saw just now, the min max, min content and max content. These are ways of defining the sizing of the tracks of the space between two lines. So for example, we can use 1FR, or we can use max content auto, or also pixels, percentages, EMs. We can see it now on Layoutit. So for example, if you set, if you're using the FR unit, which is a fraction of the available space, and you set 3 columns of 1FR, each will take 1/3 of the width. So in this case, you see 1FR, 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 and then you can set the gap between these tracks, which in this case is 2 EMs, but can be pixels or percentages too. You can also set gaps between rows and columns separately. So you can have 1 EM and 2 EMs, for example. Then we also have grid template areas, which is my favorite part of the specification. This is like a shorthand, not really a shorthand, but a different way of positioning the elements. Instead of using the line names, which we can see here, you can define names for the areas and then use grid area and that name. For this, we have to give each cell a name. One cell is, for example, the square that is formed by the intersection of 4 lines. So, So in this case, we have 3 columns and 3 rows. On the grid template areas, we have 3 dots and then a space, 3 dots again, and then 3 dots again. So every time you put a space, you are defining a new row, and then everything that is between the comillas are the cells. So in this case, I'm setting the name content and then using that name to position the element. In this case, it will be the area that is on the middle of the grid. So that is mainly the overview of how it works. There are a lot of little stuff that you can research, but this is like an overview to understand how Layoutit works. Then we have another slide that is the support. So the main question for this is it ready for production? Yes. but not really, because Internet Explorer 10 and 11 have partial support for Grid. But we can work around this, and I think we can actually start using it now. Chrome and Firefox and Safari shipped it 2 years ago, and Edge also. And as I said, Internet Explorer uses a previous specification, which is a little bit different how we define the areas and all that, but it works. So we can begin using it now. Okay, that's it. The main overview of how Grid works. And then we have Layoutit, which is the CSS Grid generator that we built around this new specification. We created this with Mariana about a year ago, after we went to a conference in Seattle with Martin. And Martin didn't understand how it works, so we built this for him, basically. It was like an experiment to make the grid visible. So this is the main screen. You probably have seen this already. But all the concepts we just seen, you can apply them here. So you have columns and rows. You can remove them and also add a few more. And you can get the code easily. Oh, sorry. You can get the code easily and see how that translates into code. So this is also a tool to understand Grid much easily than maybe reading the specification. So, for example, you can do this and maybe add an area that is called content. You can save that area. And then when you get the code, you will see that the grid template areas is generated automatically. So we have one dot for each cell, and then the area is named and used on the child. We give you the CSS and the HTML, and we have a few toggles on top to change the way you write this new syntax, because there are a few ways you can position this. As we saw, right now we are using the grid template areas, but you can not use it and instead should use the names. In Layoutit, you can see it's really small, but you can see the little names here. So it says 2, 3, 4, 5, and 2, 3, 4, and the first is 1. So to position content on there, you set grid area and you set the row start, the call start, the row end, and the call end. So you set the area using just the names. You can also use, you can also name the lines. So for example, this can be content start, and this can be content end. And when you get the code and you remove the areas, you will see that on the columns, we added a name between these brackets. And on the area, you can just reference that name instead of the number. So that is another way that you can use, and another of the spec that we are supporting on Layoutit. So using all this, you can build super fast layouts. For example, this is a super normal layout that you can build. That is, you can move this around, add a header, content, and a sidebar. Then you get the code, and that's it. You said the first two cells are the header, and then the sidebar, and then the content, and you position all the elements using the grid areas. Once again, you can remove this and just use the numbers. And then one of the super powerful features that Grid has is that you can set the sizing independently for each track. So header is on a track. That is the first one, and right now it's using fractions, but we can put pixels. Sorry, it's this one. We can use pixels, and then maybe 50. So that will be the height of the header. And for the sidebar, we can do the same. We can use 300 for the sidebar, or maybe 250. And the rest, we can leave it on 1FR. So this means that the sidebar will take 250 pixels, and then the content will be the rest of the space, because this is one fraction of the available space without the 250 pixels. So this is the code. And that's pretty much it. Then you can keep adding, for example, if you want to add a footer, you can add another row with pixels, maybe 30 pixels, 50 pixels. And then you add another area that's called footer, and you get the code. Then this is meant to be like a starting point. This is not really a site builder, but more like a structure builder to start creating the content. So we have a code pane integration. You can click this to easily go to an HTML implementation. In here, we add a few styles to make it visible. So we have an after with the class, but we can remove that. And then you can start adding stuff here and here and here. And that's pretty much it. Then the nice thing we have is also using subgrids. So you can, yes.
It's amazing how you're doing it, but can you connect? Because people are starting to freak out about your 7% of battery.
Okay, this is like a thing that happens to me always.
So much better.
I always have like 5%.
So. People were too focused on that.
Okay. You can
go
now focus on the grid. I was talking about the subgrid, which is not really a subgrid. It's more like a grid inside another grid. So you can say that this is your content. And then you click on these 4 little squares. And then you have a grid inside this other grid. And you can control this in the same way. You can add columns and remove this, or add rows. And you can keep adding areas. So this is like the sub content. And then you have like your nested grids. Then you can keep doing this until it breaks. You can save it and you get the code. And it's a super complex thing, but it works. So you can create the code pen. And this is it. So the idea, my example was on the header, for example. If you are creating just a header, you can maybe add a space for the icon, a space for the nav. For example, header, just 1 row. And then we have a few columns. On the first, you can give, I don't know, this is the logo. Then we have maybe a few icons on the back. So you can give it a 50 px, 50 px, 50 px. And then the other is just a fraction that is available after all this. So you will have your logo here. You have some icons here, like the login or logout, and then your nav links here. That is like the structure of the code. Then inside, for example, your nav links, you can use Flexbox or whatever you like. But this is like the macro structure of the site. So using this, you can create a super simple and super like sturdy foundation for your website, because it's super little code. So you only have display grid, you only have these columns, and then you just set this goes here, this goes here, and this goes here. And if you want to make something responsive, for example, you can just add a media query and just change these grid template areas. So if, for example, on mobile, you want to show the content on top, you just say here content, and this is sidebar, and things just change automatically. So it's a super easy way to keep track of your code. Another good thing that you have is you have a separation between your HTML and your design on CSS. because the source order of these items doesn't really matter. If you put the header first and you position it last, it's the same. So you can create new kinds of layouts that are not limited but by the normal structures of HTML. Okay, I think I'm pretty much done, Matthias.
You don't want to show the grid gap, maybe just
yes, yeah, I mentioned it on the slides, but
it's nice to see it in the tool too.
Yes, one of the things Layoutit does is give you a visual representation of the grid. The grid is really invisible once you set it, but we are using divs so you can see it. So when you set the gap, you can say like 10px, maybe 10px or more, and you can see in real time how it works. This is a very good way to learn the basics. So I can also show you a bit how we do that. We have a div for each of the cells, and then each of these cells have a before, which has an outline. So that way we can show the grid lines. So once we set it to 1, so you can see that before, we can make it solid. You can see it here. Okay, another thing I was missing is one of my favorite features from Layoutit, which is this. So you can click and drag each of the lines, each of the columns or rows. And you can also drag from the intersection, so you can change the sizing easily. Once you drag it, you can see it's super small, but you can see the units on the right of the grid. So this is 1FR, and then this is 0.5. Now Matthias can show you a bit how we did this.
Okay. Before you stop sharing your screen, like you can show up. You can
this
show.
This is the dark mode, which is not working super well.
All the wells, like it also have a not only get the code in CodePen, but also you have a get permalink.
Yes, that's actually super important. Yeah. Yes, we added this a feature to allow users to save their designs. I mean, they can save it just by going to the CodePen, and we also have a lot of CodePens saved by users, but we gave them a simpler alternative, which is just get the permalink. It will take a few minutes, and then you have a URL that you can share with your team or whatever. You can keep working on this after you started. And we have like, how many, Matthias?
It was like 15,000, something like that right now.
In a few months. 6 months, it is like about 100 a day that are saved this way. So it's a lot.
And it's all free?
Yes, I like free stuff. I'm not a fan of copyright, so this is ideally it will be open source once we clean it up. My idea was always to make it open source or free. I don't even want people to register, so once you get the code, you just get it, and that's it. On the other Layoutit, you have to register. But this is open for everyone. I forgot one of the most important parts. So this is content. You get the code. You are positioning it. And then we also included support for the previous specification, which is for Internet Explorer 10 and 11. The main difference for this, once you click it, you have a query that lets you target only those browsers. And then the main difference is how you position the child. So instead of saying like the start and end of each row and column, you just set the start and end, the start for row and columns, and then the amount of cells that will be occupied by that content. So this is starting on row 2 and takes only one cell of rows. And this is starting on column 2 and takes 2, something like that. It's super hard to explain, but it works and it's automatic. So you can use this to give it a little bit more support. There are a few things that Internet Explorer doesn't have. The main difference is that you don't have the auto placement of elements. On the current grid, if you just add an item, for example, if you just add an item that it's not positioned using grid area, the browser just puts it on the next available cell. So that's super useful to make it work everywhere, except on Internet Explorer, because if you do that, Internet Explorer only puts it on the first cell, so it breaks. So the way around this is just not using the auto placement, which is not so bad. You have to just explicitly position each of the elements you want to use. And that's it. Matthias?
Okay, that was very good. I think we can already finish the talk. I think that was good. And next week.
No. Now you have to explain how it works.
Okay, so let me share my screen. One thing that I think everybody saw that, but there was a little hire us button on the bottom left corner, and the tool is free, but you have to see that thing there. So that is the monetization, let's say.
Yes. When you click hire us, you go to the Lenio site, and you can just send us an email from here.
Yeah,
and it works. Actually, it works pretty well. Okay, you can share, Matthias.
Okay, you have to remove your screen first, and then
okay.
I do it with mine, because if not, if somebody is seeing the live stream and doesn't see the screen, please tell me. Screen share. Okay. You present to everyone. Okay. I'm going to show a little bit of like the code that powers the site right now. They started with Agustin and Mariana. They use it like a lot of HTML and CSS, obviously, to that their strong points. And they build it all with jQuery. And actually, it's amazing that like they managed to get like it was almost the same product that we have right now. But it because Agustin wanted to keep adding more features, for example, like flexbox support and like other kind of dragging styles and things like that he wanted to keep building up. So it was starting to be really hairy to work with the jQuery code base.
It was impossible.
Yeah. So we decided to migrate and use like one of the frameworks. And at that point, we chose Vue. And the idea was that it was closer to directly like HTML and CSS. Like Vue uses templating instead of like having JSX like in React. So you have like very clean the HTML, like without kind of like camel case in the property names and these kind of things, like class name and these things. And like also like CSS, it's also like really well supported story for CSS in Vue. So we wanted to use that. I think that it's a great framework. One of the ideas that Vue uses is like using single file components, where if, for example, I don't know, like we go to the area editor, you will see, let's go see. So area editor, you have like the template. It's a single file that is called .vue, and you have directly the template, the HTML, and where you use like this is a normal section with some like binding for the class, and this is the notation that they use for the templates. And for events, for example, like you use this notation to handle a pointer down. You have some notation like in all templating languages, like you have like the if, like before, and these kind of things. And then after the template section, you have like a script section where you define like the behavior of your component. And Vue is a little bit verbose. For example, like all the components that you're going to be using, you have to import them and then register them to be able to later use it. For example, like we are registering like a component for each icon that they are SVG inside each of them. So then later we can use them here, like so here is being used. That's a little bit verbose. I think like they can improve a little bit there. Like it's nice in React that you just import it and use it without registering. And then you have like props, same as with React. You have something that is very powerful that's called computed properties, where you just define kind of like a variable that is going to be available to the template that depends on other props or a state. And then Vue automatically like controls their activity, and when something changes, is going to change it also, and like with good caching and everything. And then you have like methods, and like that all of these are also available directly to the template. And then like I don't know, like when, for example, here we have the bar that when you have an area, you have like a few buttons if there is a grid, or if there is a flexbox, or like the one to remove, for example. So you have like the button, and Vue have this kind of like a vShow. If it has something, then like show the remove button, and you can remove the area from there. So that is quite nice how it's working. And then you have at the end, you put a style tag. If you use the scope attribute, is going to be the CSS that is included here is going to be only a scope to the component that we are viewing. So that is very, very comfortable to work with. Like it's kind of like having like this CSS in JS style that you're having like with React, but it's directly like proper CSS. And you can also like define what is the language that you're going to use. For example, like we are using Sass here, and working perfectly. There is a plugin for all the common CSS modes. So there is a lot of difference like with React, but like it was quite easy to port like all the HTML that they had from the old version, and like start to create components for everything. Like so, like you will have, I don't know, like the app will be like first like a grid, an initial grid, and the sidebar on the side, and then you will have in the sidebar all the components for the sidebar, exactly the same idea that you will use with all the modern frameworks. So like, I don't know, we can see a little bit of the grid, for example, like grid is called the component that was the main component of the grid. And in that component, you can see that like, I was showing that there is like it's just the section is just a marker, like a div for the whole thing, and inside it there is an area editor, and there are like cells for each of the cells of the grid. Let's say, and these cells are the ones that are controlling the drag and drop and all these kind of things when you move the lines. One thing that I was wanted me to show because he didn't saw it before, like what we use to move things around, we use it pointer events, pointer down, pointer move, and pointer up, instead of directly using like mouse and touch event by separately. this specification that right now is supported almost everywhere, and there is a good polyfill for them. So like it's very clean. All the type of pointers that can be your finger, can be the mouse, can be like a pencil or something that you are using, like are going to be tracked. And there isn't any kind of like this craft about delays when you click and mobile and all these kind of things that like are extremely difficult to work if you start like putting like this together with all the other kind of events separately. And one thing that is like I can show you later, but one thing that we're doing is like when we do a pointer down, we are creating we are registering the pointer move and pointer up directly in the window, and then when there is a handle up in the window, we are going to remove these handlers. And this is a lot better than just adding the pointer events in the divs or in the sections of your page, because if you like, it's very normal when you do this kind of dragging, like low level dragging at the beginning, that you're going to go with the mouse out of the window, you do a mouse up, and then when you are back, it's totally shit the application and nothing worked because the events were not handling correctly. So this is like a good pattern, because the window is going to, like when you listen in the window, is going to listen to the mouse up event, even if you are like in the toolbar or in the browser, or even if you are out of the window of the browser in another monitor or whatever, it's going to fire correctly. So one really nice things that the Vue community have is like the tooling. I wanted to show you, like they have this UI like for the project. I'm starting the UI right now, and it's very interesting because it's a graphical. Let's see. It's a graphical interface for working with your Vue projects, and they have, for example, like the plugins that you're using. For example, like we are using like the PWA plugin. Like this already gives you like all the manifest and setting the name and everything, so the app is installable in like a basic setup at least. And you have everything, like, for example, I don't know, like the version right now that we are using is 3.8, and there is already a new one, and like you can just press this button and it's going to update your dependencies, npm install everything, and that's it. You have all your dependencies, so you can have like, you can see the main dependencies, you can see like the dev dependencies, and again, like for example, I don't know, lint stage, I see that there is a new version, so I can also upgrade if I want, and this is very, very comfortable to work with. There is also some configuration, so for example, like I can go to the Vue CLI configuration, and there are things like where should be the output directory, like things about CSS and like general stuff, that this normally is very cryptic inside of JSON where you don't have any comments. And here you have not only a comment, but you have a link with more information that takes you to directly the Vue documentation. That is quite good. We have like ESLint configuration because we are using that plugin. You have the PWA, and you can directly, for example, set the app name here, what is going to be the theme color and these kind of things. And you have the tasks, and these are the tasks defined in the like the node task in the package JSON. So for example, like we can lint it from here. We are using Prettier and ESLint together, and like we are using a pre-commit hook to avoid like sending any errors. Agustin was very hesitating on it because it was messing up with his style of CSS.
It's annoying.
But it's very good when you work with a base with a lot of people, like two in this case, but it really helps. And then you can also, for example, like I can build. So let's run the build task, and this is what is Amazon is doing right now. Like Manuel set it up for us when we send to release, is going to directly do this and release it. And this is quite nice because you can see in the build, you can see like a little bit statistic about your modules. For example, like the full assets are like 300 kilobytes, just parse. This is not Shizai. Like for example, I put Shizai. So it is like total 150, the app. And if you see, like we have like 60 kilobytes in the modules, and like we have like 40 kilobytes in the dependencies. And it's like you can see exactly what is taking up the space. For example, like there is like a lot of icons and these kind of things that are taking space, but that's totally fine. And like you can decide like if a dependency is worth it or not. For example, like Vue is 23K, and Highlight.js that we are using to get the highlight going in the get code pane is only 5 kilobytes. So like you can check and see like between these, like is it worth it or not. You can you have an analyzer that you also can see like these are the assets. For example, like all these is to support pointer events. So like that's quite big. I think like we didn't. We have to check if this is added for all the browsers, and we can actually do 2 bundles. And if it's not needed, like we don't add it because it's quite big. So this tool can like help you with these things. And then you have the serve, and when you run it from here, that also like it's the same that as it will be run it in the console. But imagine that you can have a test task and everything here, and you can open the app directly here and it's going to be open. I know, Agustin, do you want to show a little bit of the Flex also, at least to show them?
Yes, I have two extra things to show. One of these is the Flex, which is work in progress. You can show it, Matthias.
But it's okay. Like if you have the app running, better if you show it.
Okay. Let me share my screen.
Wait that I finish and then I give you. So okay. It's just like a little bit more that we are using like DynamoDB for the database. That was quite good, really easy to set up, and it's a key value database in Amazon that's like right now for the 15,000 grids. I think that Manu said yesterday that it's about 7 megabytes, so it's working perfectly. And I think that's it. Like I want to do it in Svelte right now, but Agustin is saying that we should stop changing frameworks. So
I have to learn Vue.
It's going to remove in. It's going to be held in Vue. So like yeah, if you want to show us like the Flex.
Yes, I can share. Have to stop sharing. Okay, this is work in progress. This is similar to the nested grids, but basically with Flexbox. So you can add an area, and on this local build, I have an extra button, which is the Flex button. And when you click it, we add 4 Flex items by default. You can add more, but I think that's not working right now. But the idea is that you have a section to set up the Flex container, so you can change the Flex direction, maybe also the wrap. And then you have one section for all the items, and if you click one item, you have a section for that item. So let's say you have maybe 50% Flex basis, then you have this. Maybe 30. And that's pretty much it. We're still working on this. My idea is that you can nest the Flex and Grid super easily, and actually that's one of the patterns that is being used right now. So maybe you define the header with Grid, but inside the links are Flex. So I want to give users that feature, but we are still working on it, and it has quite a few bugs still. And then I think the last point is the user base that we have, the reception that we had that was super positive. Layoutit is It's part of a family of tools, as Martin said a while ago. So initially, we only had the Bootstrap builder, which is really a site builder where you can drag and drop Bootstrap elements. I think the guys, Hernan and Martin, made this about 5 years ago. And it has a lot of users from a lot of parts of the world that use it every day. So when we built this CSS grid generator, we added like a companion for the Bootstrap builder or for the new world. And then I posted it to Reddit and Hacker News, and it got a lot of votes. So after that, we got a lot of tweets. For example, this is one of the best. This is one of Google engineers, and he was mind blown.
You can talk about Chen.
Yeah, this is was one of the controversies. This Chen Simmons, and also there's also Rachel Andrews. There are a few speakers that talk always about CSS Grid. So when you present them a automatic generator, they don't like it as much. I think they're a bit snobby, in my opinion. This is just I mean, they have told us that Layoutit is for lazy developers and all that, and I don't agree at all. This is just to save time, really. If you want to make a complex grid, it doesn't make sense just to write everything. Then we have a nifty as fuck, for example.
you should find one of that you save the life of people. It's very good. I love
them.
Then
Adios Mani is another Google engineer. He tweeted about Layoutit but Bootstrap. This was on 2013. Also Jeffrey Selman, which is Martin's best friend. And then we have there are a lot of tweets. Pretty much once or twice a week we get a new tweet. For some reason in Japan it's super big. So there are a lot of Japanese users.
We have no idea what you're saying.
No. Related to this, we also have the CodePen search. When you export your grid to CodePen, there is always this title. So if you search CodePen for this title only, you can see what other people are building using this tool, which is, I think, super interesting to see like a real world usage. And we have like 70 pages of CodePen grids. It's super, super interesting. And I think that's pretty much it.
Martin, it's your call now.
You can open questions if you want, yes.
I think there was already one question in the general, if you want.
I have one question, Agustin, and we talk about this when you guys start like making this, and I still find like extremely complicated, like to use it without like without Layoutit. I think it's impossible for like any like entry level CSS developer to start doing layouts. Like why it got so complicated?
I actually don't agree with this. I think it's super simple, like super simple. If you just start with just maybe 2 columns and 2 rows, and you see the code, it's really simple code, Martin. I mean, you just had the hard part is to learn the new syntax and the new units. So you have to wrap your mind around that, and also it's a kind of a new pattern where you define all your grid inside your container, your parent. So on most of the other kinds of display, you have to set, for example, the width on the child. But this you set most of the things on the parent. I think that is the difficult part, is like changing your mindset. But the code is super simple.
More if you use named areas.
I think was asking a question.
Yes, I totally agree. It's a little bit of change the mindset. It's a little bit of understanding new things.
But
hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, Victor was saying nobody was hearing me. My big question is about those dots. Is that really something they are going to keep? because
Yes.
it's the most unreadable way of having code in the world.
You can make it more readable if you, I mean, if you go here, maybe a notes, and you have your grid template areas, no? And then you have header, and if you enter.
I think we should format it like that.
Yes, I couldn't do it on jQuery. I think we just kept it that way. But this is like a visual representation of each of the cells of your grid. I don't think there's. Yes. So if you take it like a visual representation, like I think it's much easier. So if you want a sidebar always on the left, or all the dots on the left, you just say sidebar, and that's it. I think it's.
I still think that this notation is not the best one. Like I think the other one where you put the areas and you use the, like, not the grid template areas, but the other one,
the numbers. But in my opinion,
not the numbers, but also with like name lines and these kind of things.
No,
this is easier.
No, sorry.
One of the top features for any code is readability.
Yes, I know. I know, but this is less readable than the other option. So looking at this, I can't know for sure where on the grid this header is positioned. But if I had this,
we agree that none of this is readable enough for anybody?
The first time I looked at it, I was.
Hernan, stop writing. Agustin, I don't know why it has notifications.
Oh, sorry. I have to.
You're fighting. You're not.
Yeah.
Allowing people to ask questions.
How is it? Okay. This is like a discussion we had with Martin for a long time. I'm not really convinced that this is hard. This is just different.
Yeah. No, but it might be the same like this. The first time, at least, I started like doing like layout with floats and divs. Like I saw that was magic and impossible to understand. I still don't understand it this day. So, but I don't know. I think this is an improvement. Like, but this is replacing the floats, basically.
Yes, floats. Yes, this is the first time we have something to build layouts. Floats are not really to build layouts, so it's a hack. So I think this gives you like more stability in your code. With floats, you have a lot of bugs and gotchas that you have to take care of.
Yeah, just to be clear, Agustin, I think this is a great stuff about like Layoutit. That is actually taking something that might be kind of difficult and put it on a visual way, and then it's just like, I don't care about the code, but
Yeah, it's a learning tool. In fact, a lot of the comments we get is like, I didn't understand Grid until I used Layoutit, and then I got it. I really like Grid. I know it's hard, but I really like it. It's much better than Float.
Really, the main problem is not even the layout, it's not even the output. The problem is we need readable code because there are several people working on this. And the first person reading the dot.
Yes, I know. The dot is like the most controversial part. But you get used to it. I mean, it's just one cell. And that's it.
Yes, and you get used to jail, but it doesn't mean it's good.
Okay, maybe you can propose a new syntax, Iago, and send it to the CSS working group.
We can check the point for like Iago.
Feature is modeling something that is quite powerful and like complex in the thing like that you can do like a lot of layouts with this, like a very complex layout.
There are also a lot of other ways to. There is a grid shorthand, so just a minute. So you can just say grid, and then you set all the items there, but it is much less understandable than the other alternative. So in this case, you say the rows, the line, the names, the sizing, everything on the same grid property.
You should close the flag, Agustin.
What?
please close Slack. You're getting notification there all the time.
I'm going to
It's really
close.
annoying. Thank you.
I know it's yes.
Sorry, one more thing that maybe like for the people that we don't do CSS much, we don't understand. I went with them to this conference on Seattle, and like all the people that create this on the standard on CSS, they were like giving talks, and everyone was extremely excited about this. And I don't know if you can explain a bit more why this is so important.
Well, as I said, this is the first time we have a specification that it's specifically for layouts. Floats and inline and all that was just to maybe float an image, and we just worked around us. And this is the first time we have something to build complete layouts. And also the first time it's two-dimensional. So with Flexbox, we got one dimension, which is either row or column, or maybe a row that wraps. But on Grid, you can position elements, for example, leaving white space, which is, for me, super powerful. So, for example, you want a header here, and then the content here, and that's it. These cells will be empty, and you can keep working on. I mean, for me, the main thing is that it lets you build layouts that were not possible, really possible with floats or Flexbox. And it should bring new kinds of design, I think, probably new tendencies and new trends to use these features. I think it's much cleaner also.
Agustin, I have a question.
Yes.
I should ask the same question on the general channel, but we normally get a lot of questions or people requiring us to use the tool for the Bootstrap Builder and also the CSS Grid Generator as plugins for the tools, the internal tools. Actually, SAP arrived as asking something like that, and Commvault. So those are really good examples.
As a plugin.
Kind of a plugin, but that's the question. How do you see this tool? I mean, is there a path to create some kind of plugin or something like that to allow people to use it on their sites? We got a request that was an interesting case for a guy who was creating it was for designing warehouses for logistics.
I remember.
So that guy needed something pretty much like this. So
yeah, I think what we can.
Okay.
My goal for this would be to create like an engine using Grid. So maybe the technical side, Matthias can give you more information, but I think maybe abstracting the Grid, and for example, I made a thing that lets you upload an image, and then you can convert that image to a grid using cells and pixels and all that. So I think there's a lot of potential for using Grid as a general, like maybe drawing engine or something like that. But I'm not sure really how we can achieve that. And Matthias, do you have an idea?
Agustin wants to compete with Sketch.
For example.
That's the end game of Agustin.
Yes.
How can you create non-uniform cells? I mean,
it's all rectangles. It's all rectangles. No, you can't. This is a grid, and all you have to work with are the line numbers and the intersection of the numbers. So it's all rectangles.
Could we hack something on top of CSS Grid and the standard where we could create non-rectangles?
Yes. For that, you would have to, for example, add a div here. If you want to create a circle, maybe with a border radius, and then just position it on that area. My idea is to create something like that, like a sketch similar to Sketch app. That the basic difference is that on that version, you would get a grid that is already defined, maybe with a lot of cells. And then you can just click and drag and create rectangles for your content. And that's pretty much the Sketch way. And then you can, for example, add an image, a shape, text, or whatever. But
even even without going so far, like this tool, like in the same way that you added a sub-grid or a sub-flex, like you can add that you said directly, like as another kind of drop-down there or button. And you can add other things like upload image, and there will be an image here, or upload like content, or you can like fill it up with lorem ipsum or things like that. Like
for me, that's a second step on this application. I think that Layoutit needs to keep being a structure builder, and then maybe you can have another button when you access a different version of this app, where you have your grid already defined, and then you start adding. Because if we start including lorem ipsum and images and shapes, it's a site builder. It's not really a structure builder. But we will get there. I mean, for me, it's like the next step. The next versions probably goes somewhere around.
How much effort would be to add different shapes than
it depends. What kind of shapes? A polygon, for example.
In hours.
Yeah. In hours, like 20 minutes now.
I think the answer is 42.
I mean, circles, if you want to add a circle or a rectangle, it's super easy. But if you want to add a polygon, we can probably do this because we have now clip path and some other weird stuff. But this is all HTML, so you are limited by what you can do with HTML. So if you want to make like a duck shape, you can't really do that. Or maybe you can, but
put the upload SVG button there, and
well, for example, you could import an SVG, and yes.
Interesting.
And actually, a question.
Yeah.
Hello, yes, I have a question. I put it in Slack, but I read it for you.
Okay.
Grid layout seems as our teammate has sent some blog post about that grid layout doesn't need any media queries for work as a responsive CSS. Would it be possible to layout it in the future to configure this behavior?
Yes, it's hard for us to make like breakpoints inside this. I don't want to add too much complexity to Layoutit, but for example, one of the things we want to add is a resize of the container. So in my mind, what you would do is make first your normal styles, and then make another and add your responsive queries there. And then the amount of queries that you require, it depends on the sizing that you're using. So for example, you can use maybe auto, and that it adapts to the content of the element. Or also you can use the min content and max content. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yes. Thank you.
For me, one of the features I really want to add is the resizing of this container. I think that would make it clearer.
Yeah. Even you can show it maybe twice for different sizes. Right?
Yeah,
like how they show it with the iPhone and Android and iPad and these kind of things.
We could really add maybe like a breakpoint manager, but I don't want it to be super complex.
I seen somebody else was raising the hand when Ender was talking. Daniel?
Yeah, me. You might have answered it, but I just want to confirm because I'm not sure if I listened to that. But how responsive is this? I mean, if you want to use it like one single layout for mobile, like how would you do it?
This is I can show you here, for example. This is responsive because this is 1FR, 1FR, 1FR. This is a fraction of the space available divided by 4. So this is responsive by default because the unit works like that. But if you want to maybe add a media query, my advice is to only change the grid template areas. So you would set a master grid to say it somehow, like a master grid, and then you have a grid template areas for your normal breakpoint, and then you add extra queries that change where these grid areas are positioned. So when you do that, you don't need to change anything from here. You just need to change one line, and all the design just adapts automatically. But you would need some queries, depending on how you build it.
Okay, got it.
Why do you think, Agustin, that most people are not like learning a lot of CSS?
CSS or grid? Both.
Grid or CSS? I think there's like a big gap on like what we do on development, and like at least I talk by myself. Like I never actually learn how to do it properly. We usually have we always have you, so we are like spoiled. But
yeah, I think you have to have a little bit of an interest to learn it in depth. The thing with CSS is that it has a few like gotchas, a few bugs that if you don't know that is happening, maybe you get frustrated easily. For example, if you float an element and you don't use a clear fix, for example, everything will break. And on the case of CSS Grid, I think that the support of Internet Explorer is driving it, the usage down. But I think that in the next maybe 2 or 3 years, it will be the main layout method next to Flexbox, probably.
I have also some theories about this. Like one of the things that happened before was that there was a really strong separation between the designers and like the people doing like
Yes.
the logic and JavaScript and these kind of things. More when there was even more separation and people were doing like backend stuff with like other languages that were not directly like web native, and like it was really like separate works. And right now that like as we saw like with Vue, that you have like the single file component concept, and like even like with React that you have like CSS in JS and all this like movement to try to like work more at the component level, and you have the CSS a lot closer to your components, and you really need this knowledge of HTML and CSS, like at least the fundamentals for both. And I think that now also it's a better time to like not only that it's like more needed right now, but it's also like better to learn and easier to learn, because a lot of the gotchas are disappearing, and a lot of the hacks that we were using before for layout are being replaced by proper features like directly sought for the purpose. So I think that like moving forward, like CSS and HTML, like the line between the like the designer and the programmer are going to disappear. Like it's going to be blurred at least a lot.
Especially with the Houdini and all that. If you know about it, it's pretty. I mean, you will be able to build your own layout methods in the future. So you can build your maybe Martin grid if you want. That will be pretty interesting. Okay, any more questions?
Yes, this is Oscar. I have one question. Well,
yep.
I don't know if it's a question or a suggestion. For example, for the responsive, why don't you provide the users like a button for the table view and a button for mobile view, and give them the ability to change the grid areas? Because just responsive is just putting the grid areas in a different way. Maybe that solves the problem. And I don't know, what do you think, Agustin and Martin, in that case?
I think we have to think about how to include that feature without making it too complex.
Yeah.
In my mind, it's something similar to the DevTools breakpoints. I don't know if you know about it, but if you go here and then show media queries, you get like a bar where you can set this. Maybe something like this would be pretty useful.
Yes, would be awesome.
Okay, we can make a new branch and maybe try something like this.
Yeah, or maybe you can put just 2 generic points, like a side breakpoints. Maybe for
like
like 737 and desktop 1025, something like that.
The problem I have always is where to stop, because then you say, okay, we can add like an image
Never.
for the.
Never.
You have to balance. You have to balance the complexity. I think.
When you are the dev tools of Chrome, then you stop.
I want to make this approachable.
And then you want to be better than them.
Thank you for
Okay. I think the responsive feature, Matthias, is super requested. So
yeah,
we have to work on that.
Actually, it's a great idea, I think, also.
There are another. My goal was to add as most as possible of the spec of Grid, but it is super big. For example, instead of Grid template columns, you can use Grid auto columns, which is a whole different story. I think it would be for another talk.
You could read another talk, Agustin.
We can keep talking about like 1 extra hour if you want. But the auto rows, what we're setting here is the explicit grid, and the auto rows would be the implicit grid, basically. That is when you want to have maybe an infinite number of items and you don't want to declare the whole grid. You can just have the browser automatically generate it using that feature. Maybe one day we also add that. Okay. Any more?
I think we are past over the time. We can do it again next week, August.
I'm fine. I think I'm fine for a month.
Thanks a lot, everybody, for joining.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.